I lay on the hospital bed listening to machines breathe for me while my chest felt empty. I wanted to believe they were here to save me. I turned my head and whispered, "Dad?" Richard Carter didn't look at me. Papers shuffled. Pens clicked. The doctor said, "You need a signature. Time is critical." My stepmother leaned closer and said softly, "She's weak. She won't understand this anyway." I forced my eyes open and said, "Margaret, what are you signing?" She smiled without warmth. "Just formalities." I tried to sit up. "Stop, please." My father finally spoke. "Evelyn, calm down. Why are you selling my shares?" I asked. He sighed like I was a burden. "The company needs stability. Lucas is better suited now." Lucas stood behind him, silent, avoiding my eyes. I laughed weakly. "I built that project." "You know I did." My father said, "You were useful, not essential." Daniel stood near the window. I said, "Daniel, say something." He looked away and said, "You need rest." "That's it?" I asked. "After everything we planned?" He rubbed his neck. "This isn't the time." I felt something tear inside me. "You promised me a future." Margaret whispered, "Don't upset her more." The doctor said, "We need consent now." I grabbed the rail and said, "If you do this, I won't forgive you." My father signed anyway. I stared at the ceiling and asked, "Am I already dead to you?" No one answered. My heart monitor slowed. Panic hit me. "Help me. I can't breathe." Daniel stepped back. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Liar." Lucas finally spoke. "She would have failed anyway. She was never strong." That hurt more than the pain spreading through my chest. My breath shook. "I trusted you. All of you." My father said, "This is business. Don't be emotional." Tears burned my eyes. "I'm your daughter. I carried your name." He turned away without regret. The room blurred. I felt cold crawling up my hands. I remembered nights working late, believing loyalty mattered. I remembered defending them, fighting for approval, choosing silence over dignity. The machine screamed. Nurses rushed in, voices overlapping. Margaret said, "Save her if you can." I almost laughed. I wanted to scream, to ask why love was always conditional. My mouth wouldn't move. As darkness closed in, I thought if I had another chance, I would never beg for love again. Then everything went silent. I opened my eyes to the sound of clinking plates and familiar voices arguing softly. My heart slammed as I looked down and saw my hands, unmarked and steady. I sat at the Carter dining table. Margaret said, "Lucas, eat slowly." Lucas laughed. "I'm starving." My father glanced at me and said, "Evelyn, you're quiet today." I swallowed and said, "I'm listening." My chest felt tight. This was 10 years ago. I wasn't engaged yet. I wasn't broken yet. Margaret smiled politely and said, "She's probably tired. She's always so sensitive." I stared at my plate and thought, this is before everything. My father said, "Lucas, the board meeting went well. They like your ideas." Lucas grinned. "I told you I could handle it." I looked up and said, "I worked on that proposal too." My father waved his hand. "Details. You overthink things." The words hit, familiar and sharp. I nodded. "You're right." Margaret paused. "That's new." Lucas smirked. "She finally gets it." I felt panic rise, but I forced it down. In my past life, I would have argued. I would have begged to be seen. I asked calmly, "Is Daniel coming tonight?" Margaret said, "Not yet. He's busy." Busy lying, I thought. My father said, "You should learn from him. Ambition matters." I said, "I know." Silence fell. They watched me like I was a stranger. Lucas leaned back. "Did you hit your head or something?" I almost laughed. "No. I'm fine." Inside, memories crashed. Hospital lights. Cold voices. Signed papers. Margaret said softly, "You seem distant." I met her eyes and said, I'm just thinking about not repeating my mistakes. My father said, thinking won't get you anywhere. I nodded again. Then I'll stop. His brows furrowed. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, I won't argue tonight. Lucas laughed. Good. Less noise. I felt strangely calm. Every insult felt smaller now that I knew the ending. Margaret reached for my hand. Family should talk things out. I pulled my hand back gently. Some things don't need words. My father said, Are you being dramatic? I stood up. No. I'm being honest. The room froze. I said, I'm tired. I'll eat later. Lucas said, Running away again? I looked at him and said, No. I'm choosing when to leave. Margaret whispered, Evelyn. I grabbed my bag and said, Good night. As I walked away, my legs trembled, but my mind felt clear. At the door, I thought, I will not fight for love this time. Behind me, no one followed. I opened my eyes to the sound of clinking plates and familiar voices arguing softly. My heart slammed as I looked down and saw my hands, unmarked and steady. I sat at the Carter dining table. Margaret said, Lucas, eat slowly. Lucas laughed. I'm starving. My father glanced at me and said, Evelyn, you're quiet today. I swallowed and said, I'm listening. My chest felt tight. This was 10 years ago. I wasn't engaged yet. I wasn't broken yet. Margaret smiled politely and said, She's probably tired. She's always so sensitive. I stared at my plate and thought, this is before everything. My father said, Lucas, the board meeting went well. They like your ideas. Lucas grinned. I told you I could handle it. I looked up and said, I worked on that proposal too. My father waved his hand. Details. You overthink things. The words hit, familiar and sharp. I nodded. You're right. Margaret paused. That's new. Lucas smirked. She finally gets it. I felt panic rise, but I forced it down. In my past life, I would have argued. I would have begged to be seen. I asked calmly, Is Daniel coming tonight? Margaret said, Not yet. He's busy. Busy lying, I thought. My father said, You should learn from him. Ambition matters. I said, I know. Silence fell. They watched me like I was a stranger. Lucas leaned back. Did you hit your head or something? I almost laughed. No. I'm fine. Inside, memories crashed. Hospital lights. Cold voices. Signed papers. Margaret said softly, You seem distant. I met her eyes and said, I'm just thinking about not repeating my mistakes. My father said, Thinking won't get you anywhere. I nodded again. Then I'll stop. His brows furrowed. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, I won't argue tonight. Lucas laughed. Good. Less noise. I felt strangely calm. Every insult felt smaller now that I knew the ending. Margaret reached for my hand. Family should talk things out. I pulled my hand back gently. Some things don't need words. My father said, Are you being dramatic? I stood up. No. I'm being honest. The room froze. I said, I'm tired. I'll eat later. Lucas said, Running away again? I looked at him and said, No. I'm choosing when to leave. Margaret whispered, Evelyn. I grabbed my bag and said, Good night. As I walked away, my legs trembled, but my mind felt clear. At the door, I thought, I will not fight for love this time. Behind me, no one followed. I stood in the Carter living room with a single suitcase by my feet and said, I'm leaving. My father looked at the papers and said, You'll be back. I said, No. Margaret sighed softly and said, You're being emotional. I replied, I'm being clear. Lucas laughed and said, She'll last a month. I picked up my mother's old watch and slipped it on. My father asked, Is this about money? I said, It's about respect. He shook his head. You're making a mistake. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Miss Carter, sign here and here." I signed without hesitation. Margaret leaned closer and whispered, "We can fix this." I looked at her and said, "You never tried." She stiffened. Lucas said, "Don't be dramatic." I answered, "I'm done performing." My father stood and said, "You'll regret this." I met his eyes and said, "I already did." The lawyer slid the final page forward. "This ends all claims." I nodded. "That's the point." Silence filled the room. I lifted my suitcase and walked to the door. Margaret said, "Where will you go?" I said, "Somewhere honest." Lucas snorted, "You won't survive." I paused and said, "Watch me." I stepped outside and felt the air hit my face. My hands were shaking, but my back was straight. I took a bus across the city and signed a lease I could afford. The landlord said, "It's small." I said, "It's mine." That night, I sat on the floor and listened to the quiet. Fear crept in slowly. I whispered, "You can do this." I looked at the watch ticking steadily. It reminded me that time could be kind. I hugged my knees and breathed through the panic. No voices judging. No conditions. Just space. Just choice. I said softly, "I survived once." I swallowed and added, "I will dominate this time." I sat there until dawn broke, alone but unowned. My phone buzzed, and my father's name flashed. I let it ring. A message appeared, "Come back." I deleted it. Another message followed, "You'll need us." I said aloud, "No." The room echoed nothing. I unpacked slowly, placing my clothes in neat piles. I told myself, "This is enough." The watch ticked louder than my thoughts. I imagined my mother smiling. I asked, "Did I do right?" The silence felt like approval. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow waited, uncertain but open. I said, "I'm not afraid." My voice shook, but it held. I closed my eyes and let exhaustion win. In that quiet, I felt something new. Relief. Freedom. I promised myself I won't return. The city hummed outside. I belonged to myself. That truth settled deep. I breathed once, twice. The future didn't scare me anymore. I smiled, small but real. I reached for the light and turned it off. Darkness felt safe. My last thought was steady. I survived once. I will dominate this time. I held that promise close. No family name defined me now. No past could cage me. I rested with resolve hard as steel. Morning would test me. I welcomed it. Whatever came, I would face it alone, prepared, unafraid, and awake. This was my beginning, earned through loss and clarity. I exhaled, calm at last. Freedom was terrifying and real. I walked into the office building using a name no one recognized and said to the receptionist, "I'm here to see Ethan Brooks." She looked me over and said, "Do you have an appointment?" "I do," I said. 10 minutes. Ethan opened the door himself and frowned. "You're early." "I value time," I said. He motioned me in. "Sit." I did. He said, "Your proposal is risky." I replied, "So is standing still." He crossed his arms. "You're asking for a lot with very little capital." "I'm asking for trust," I said. "The numbers will follow." He tapped the file. "You're confident." "I'm careful," I corrected. He leaned back. "Why avoid big firms?" "Because they watch too closely," I said. He studied me. "You're hiding something?" I met his eyes. "Everyone is." Silence stretched. Finally, he said, "Explain this move." I pointed at the chart. Short-term fear. Long-term correction. He frowned. "That's optimistic." "It's informed," I said. "People panic on headlines, not data." He asked, "And if you're wrong?" "I adjust," I said. "I don't freeze." He exhaled. "You've failed before." "Yes," I said. "That's why I won't again." He nodded slowly. "Fine. Small investment. That's all I need," I said. Days passed to numbers and calls. Ethan said, "You're calm." I answered, "Panic wastes energy." He showed me the screen and said, "It's moving." I smiled slightly. It always does. Inside, fear whispered, "What if they see you?" I silenced it and said, "Hold another day." Ethan hesitated. "Everyone else is selling." I said, "Then we buy." He laughed. "You're bold." "I'm patient," I replied. That night, I checked updates alone and whispered, "Please work." The next morning, Ethan burst in and said, "You were right." I nodded. "I usually am." He said, "Profit small but clean." "That's perfect," I said. A man stood near the window and watched me. He said, "Interesting timing." I turned. "Do I know you?" "Nathan Hale," he said. "I observe patterns." I said, "Then observe this one." He smiled faintly. "You don't chase attention." "I avoid it," I said. He asked, "Why?" "Because silence lasts longer," I answered. He nodded once. "You're not afraid." I thought of hospital beds and signatures. "I've been afraid," I said. "I'm done now." He left without another word. Ethan said, "Who was that?" "Someone curious," I replied. I checked the account again. Green numbers. No name attached. No applause. Just results. My phone stayed silent. No family. No past. I breathed out and said, "This is enough." Ethan said, "You look alive." I smiled. "I am." As I walked out, I kept my head down. The market didn't need to know me. It only needed to remember my moves. That was my first win. Quiet. Clean. Mind, I watched the news report in silence as the anchor said, "Carter Group shares fell again today." Ethan called and said, "Did you see this?" "I did," I replied. He hesitated. "Your timing is strange." I said, "Timing is everything." At another meeting, someone said, "Their leadership looks unstable." I kept my voice neutral. Instability reveals habits. Ethan leaned closer. "Your father is blaming staff publicly." I nodded. "He always does." A message popped up from a private channel. Lucas's voice echoed through a leaked clip. "Just push it through. It'll work." I muted it and said, "Reckless." Ethan frowned. "You sound certain." "I've seen this ending," I said. Later that day, my phone rang. "Evelyn, this is Olivia Moore." I said, "You're thorough." She replied, "You're quiet." "I prefer results," I said. She asked, "Why me?" "Because you don't flinch," I said. She laughed softly. "True." "Are you aware how close this is getting?" "Yes," I said. "To your family," she added. I said, "They stopped being that." She paused. "This feels personal." I answered, "It's precise." At a strategy call, Ethan said, "They're selling assets fast." I replied, "Fear does that." He asked, "Are we pushing further?" "We're holding," I said. "Let them move first." Olivia joined the call and said, "You're winning quietly." I said, "That's the only way that lasts." She warned, "Don't let revenge drive you." I corrected her. "This isn't revenge." She waited. "This is correction," I said. Silence followed. Olivia said, "Then I'll protect you." I said, "That's all I need." Days passed with numbers shifting gently. Ethan said, "Another drop." I asked, "Any sign they noticed us?" "No," he said. "They're too busy arguing." I imagined my father slamming his desk, blaming names I once worked beside. Lucas called an emergency meeting, his voice sharp and unsure. I whispered, slowly. At night, fear crept in. "What if they recognize you?" I said aloud, "Then they'll be too late." Olivia sent a message. "Documents ready." I replied, "Proceed." Ethan said, "You're calm." "I learned what panic costs," I said. He asked, "Do you feel anything?" I thought of a hospital bed and answered, "Control." The next report showed another loss. Ethan exhaled. This is real. Yes, I said. And reversible.
For them, he asked. No, I said.
For me. I ended the call and stared at the screen. No celebration. No announcement. Just balance shifting. I said softly, "You taught me this." The market didn't know my name. My family didn't see my hand. But they were losing ground. And I was gaining space. Quietly. Exactly as planned. I was reviewing numbers when a familiar voice said, "Evelyn." I looked up and saw Sophia smiling like nothing had ever changed. I said, "Hello." She sat without asking. "You disappeared." "I was busy," I replied.
She tilted her head.
"Busy succeeding, it seems." I said, "Work tends to reward focus." She laughed softly. "You always were serious." I watched her hands. Perfect nails. Steady pulse. She said, "People are talking about you."
People always talk, I said.
She leaned closer. "Daniel talks too." I met her eyes.
About what?
"About regret," she said. "He misses you." I felt nothing. "That's unfortunate." She blinked. "You don't care?" I asked, "Should I?" She smiled wider. "You used to." "I used to believe many things," I said. She crossed her legs. "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "On purpose." She studied me. "Success looks good on you." "So does honesty," I replied. Her smile tightened. "I was worried about you." I nodded. "Worry suits you." She laughed again, sharper. "You're cold." "I'm clear," I said. She said, "Daniel said you left without explaining."
I didn't know him that, I replied.
She tapped the table. "Closure matters. Only to people who need permission," I said. Her eyes flickered. "You sound bitter." "I sound finished," I corrected. She leaned back. "You think you're above us now?" "I think I'm separate," I said. Silence stretched. She said softly, "He really did love you." I shrugged. Love shouldn't arrive late. She watched me carefully. "Do you ever miss us?" I answered, "I miss who I thought you were." Her smile cracked for a second. Then she said, "You're impressive." "So are masks," I replied.
She stood.
"We should catch up properly." "I don't revisit closed chapters," I said. She paused. "You always were dramatic." I smiled faintly. "You always underestimated silence." She walked away without another word. Nathan stepped beside me and said, "That was deliberate." I said, "She wanted control." He nodded. Emotional enemies smile first. "I noticed," I said. He asked, "Did it hurt?" "No," I said. "That surprised me." He said, "Good. Distance unsettles manipulators." I watched Sophia glance back once. She didn't wave. Nathan said, "You didn't react." "I didn't need to," I replied. He smiled. "That's power." I exhaled slowly. Inside, I felt steady. No anger. No ache. Just awareness. I returned to my screen and said, "Let's proceed." Nathan nodded. "She won't stop." "I won't either," I said. From the window, I saw Sophia hesitate, then leave. For the first time, she looked unsure. I thought silence teaches lessons words never could. And I kept working. I agreed to the meeting because refusing would have looked emotional. Richard Carter arrived 10 minutes late and said, "You look well." I replied, "Thank you for coming." He frowned slightly. "You sound formal." "This is a formal meeting," I said. He sat down and said, "I didn't expect this call to go through." I asked, "Why did you request it?" He studied my face. "You've been moving quietly." "I prefer efficiency," I said. He folded his hands. "You're interfering with my company." "I'm participating in the market," I replied.
He scoffed.
"Don't play games."
"I don't," I said.
"I play numbers." Silence pressed between us. He finally said, "You could have come to me." I asked, "For what?"
"For guidance," he said.
"For reconciliation." I nodded once. "Those options expired." His jaw tightened. "You're still my daughter." I said calmly. You stopped being my father first. He leaned forward. I made hard decisions.
So did I said.
He said, you were emotional back then. I was loyal, I corrected. He waved his hand. Same thing. No, I said. Loyalty sacrifices. Emotion begs. His eyes darkened. You think you're better than us now? I think I'm independent, I replied. He laughed without humor. You won't last alone. I already did, I said. He paused. Is this about the past? It's about the present, I said.
He sighed.
I'm offering forgiveness. I smiled politely. I don't need it. That startled him. You should be careful, he warned. Enemies won't spare you. I learned that early, I said. He stared at me. Why are you like this now? I thought of hospital sheets and sign papers. I said, because I learned what silence is worth. He looked away first. You've changed, he muttered. Yes, I said. And you didn't notice until it cost you. He stood abruptly. You're making this personal. I stopped making it personal, I replied. That's why I'm winning. He said, families should protect each other. I answered, families shouldn't trade blood for shares. He clenched his fists. You sound ungrateful. I sound finished, I said. He shook his head. You'll regret cutting ties. I regret trusting too long, I replied. The room felt smaller. He said, what do you want? I met his eyes evenly. Nothing. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. I didn't raise you to be like this, he said. You didn't raise me, I answered. You managed me. He had no response. I stood and said, this meeting is over. He said quietly, you really see me as an enemy now. I paused. I see you as a competitor. His breath caught. I walked away without looking back. Outside, my pulse steadied. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For the first time, his opinion carried no weight. I whispered to myself, that chapter is closed. And it was. I saw Daniel's name on the news before I heard his voice again. Ethan called and said, your ex is finished. I replied, I know. An hour later, my phone rang. Evelyn, Daniel said, his voice rough. Please meet me. I hesitated, then said, one time. We met in a quiet office lobby where cameras couldn't reach. He looked thinner. Tired. He said, you saw the reports. I did, I answered. He laughed bitterly. They turned on me. You built with unstable people, I said. He ran a hand through his hair. I made mistakes. Yes, I said. He stepped closer. I never thought it would end like this. I looked at him and said, I did. He swallowed. You warned me. I left, I corrected. He whispered, I miss you. The words hit old memories. I asked, do you miss me or the version who believed you? He flinched. I loved you. I nodded. At your convenience. He said, I was scared. So was I replied. I just didn't sell people for safety. He clenched his fists. They exposed everything. Karma prefers daylight, I said. He looked up. Can you help me? I shook my head slowly.
No.
Please, he said. Just advice. I answered. You didn't listen before. He dropped into a chair. I lost everything. I said, you lost what you borrowed. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, then stopped. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For all of it. I believed him. It didn't change anything. I said, apologies don't rewind time. He whispered, I would do it differently. Of course, I said. Now that it hurts. He looked up. Did you ever really forgive me? I thought of hospital lights and silence. I stopped carrying you, I said. That was enough. His eyes filled. I deserve this. Yes, I said. He laughed weakly. You sound cold. I sound healed, I replied. He stood slowly. This is goodbye, isn't it? It was a long time ago, I said. He nodded. You don't hate me. No, I said. I don't feel anything. That seemed to break him more than anger would have. He said, I wish I had listened. I replied, I wish you had respected. We stood in silence. Then he said, You're strong. I had to be, I answered. He took a step back. Take care, Evelyn. You too, I said, meaning none of it and all of it. He turned and walked away, shoulders slumped. I watched until he disappeared into the crowd. Inside, something shifted. I felt the ghost of who I used to be, then let her go. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. I felt quiet. Karma had spoken. Memory had lost its power. I walked out into the light without looking back. For the last time. And I didn't carry sadness with me. I carried closure that I received the call first thing in the morning. Evelyn, Olivia said, her voice calm but precise. It's finalized. I asked, all legal channels cleared? Yes, she replied. The shares, the influence, it's under your control now. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me.
Good.
Proceed quietly. She chuckled lightly. You always prefer subtle victories. I prefer control, I corrected. Later, I watched the news. Lucas Carter's voice trembled. We're evaluating options. I whispered. Too late. Margaret appeared on a live interview, eyes red. I can't believe this. I said softly. Neither could I once. The anchor mentioned Richard Carter stepping down temporarily. I listened as the report said he looked pale, exhausted, even broken. Ethan called. They're reacting. They always do, I said. A message from Olivia appeared. Lucas is panicking. Margaret is unstable. Your father looks defeated. I didn't smile. I never smiled at this. I sat back in my chair and said aloud, Peace is louder than triumph. Ethan laughed. You sound serene. I am, I said. Winning is not applause. It's clarity. Olivia said, You could have acted faster, publicly. I would rather act correctly, I replied. Subtlety lasts longer. Another report flashed. Lucas tried a risky merger. It failed. Shares plummeted further. I leaned back. Predictable. Ethan asked, Do you feel satisfaction? No, I said. This isn't revenge. It's finality. Olivia called again. Everything is in order legally. You hold decisive power now. Good, I said. I never wanted chaos. I thought of the hospital bed, of the family that abandoned me, of Daniel and Daniel's regrets. I said quietly, Everything is settled. Margaret appeared again in a press conference, tears streaming, voice shaky. We didn't expect this outcome. I whispered, None of us ever do, until it happens. The news described my control over the Carter shares, my moves unacknowledged by name, yet effective. I said, Silence never lies. Ethan asked, Do you fear them trying to regain influence? No, I said. They've already lost their place. Olivia replied, You're calm. Not triumphant. Control doesn't require shouting, I said. Later, I looked at my reflection, the woman who once begged for approval, who once trusted too much. I touched my mother's old watch and said, This feels right. Ethan said, It's unlike anyone I've seen you take. I've learned, I said, that quiet dominance lasts longer than loud victory. The office was still. The market shifted around me, but I felt nothing but peace. No joy, no celebration, no revenge. Only clarity. The Carter name lost control, and I held the calm certainty of permanence. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight lift. Finally, I whispered, It's done. And it truly was. The cameras clicked the moment I walked into the boardroom. A reporter asked, Miss Carter, what changed? How did you rise so fast? I looked at her calmly. Focus, strategy, and patience. Another reporter said, What about your family's influence? I shook my head. I've built this independently. One journalist pressed, And Daniel, what do you say to his fall? I said simply, I don't comment on personal matters. Voices murmured. I remained composed. Nathan leaned slightly and whispered, "They'll try to provoke you." "I know," I said softly. "I answer only what matters." A camera flashed. "What about your father's reaction?" I met the lens steadily. "I've learned that control doesn't require approval." He nodded once. "Good. You're calm." "Calm is better than vindication," I replied. Someone else asked, "Miss Carter, do you regret leaving your family behind?" I said, "Regret belongs to people who stayed. I belong to myself." The questions kept coming, sharp but manageable. A young reporter leaned forward. "Are you happy?" I considered it. Happiness is private. Success is visible. I have both. Nathan whispered again. "They'll test your composure." "I won't falter," I said. He smiled faintly, not as a protector, but as someone equal in strategy. A camera zoomed closer. "What about those who doubted you?" I said. Doubt was expected. I acted anyway. The room quieted. A senior reporter asked, "Do you forgive past betrayals?" I met the question with stillness. Forgiveness is optional. Learning is essential. Another reporter pressed, "Did trauma define your strategy?" I shook my head. Experience informs choices. Trauma doesn't define me. Whispers ran through the room. I remained motionless. Nathan said softly, "You're composed enough to lead, not just survive." I replied, "Leadership isn't about survival. It's about clarity." One final question came. "Miss Carter, what's next?" I smiled faintly. "Growth, responsibility, and precision. That's enough." The cameras clicked off. Nathan said, "You handled them perfectly." "I handled myself," I corrected. He nodded. Equal footing. We walked through the hallway together. I said quietly, "I'm not looking for approval anymore." He answered, "You don't need it." I paused and touched my mother's watch. Identity isn't what happened to you. It's what you build afterward. Nathan said nothing.
He didn't need to.
I felt the weight of the past lift, not with revenge, not with anger, but with clarity. Media questions had been answered without compromise. My name carried influence. My actions carried respect. I whispered to myself, "I am enough." Nathan walked beside me, silent but present. I didn't lean on him. I didn't follow him. We moved forward as equals. I reflected on every betrayal, every lesson, every lonely night. Nothing haunted me anymore. The past existed only as context. The future existed as choice. And I chose power without apology. No one could diminish me. No one could claim me. I exhaled slowly, feeling steady. Finally, I said aloud, "This is mine. All of it." And for the first time, it truly was that I stood before my mother's grave, the wind brushing my hair. "I made it," I whispered. The words felt strange and heavy, yet true. I placed my hand on the cold stone. I didn't come here to complain or blame. A voice inside me murmured, "You survived because you chose yourself." I said aloud, "I didn't destroy anyone. I outgrew them." The flowers swayed in the wind. I used to beg for love where none was given. That ends today. I sat on the bench nearby and looked at her name. I carried so much fear, so much doubt. I let it rule me. A soft chuckle escaped me. Now I see. I never had to. I closed my eyes. I trusted too easily. I forgave too quickly. I asked for approval that wasn't mine to give. I opened them and spoke into the quiet. "Mom, I hope you know I finally understand myself." A bird landed nearby. I smiled faintly. I chose survival over dependence. Strength over weakness. Silence over desperation. I remembered Daniel, Lucas, Richard, every betrayal. Every cold glance. Every signature that once signed my defeat. "I don't carry anger anymore," I said. Not because it's gone, but because it's unnecessary. I touched my mother's watch in my pocket, a relic of time and rebirth. I never abandoned myself now. A rustle of leaves reminded me of how fragile life can be. I whispered. I've been given a second chance. I'm not wasting it. I thought of the market, of quiet victories, of people who smiled when I walked away. I was careful this time. I measured. I learned. I acted when it mattered. The wind lifted my hair, brushing my cheeks. I said softly, "No one can define me but me." I felt the weight of old grief loosen. I don't need approval. I don't need apologies. I need clarity, and I have it. I imagine my mother smiling faintly, seeing me as I am. "You're proud of yourself?" I asked aloud. A whisper of air seemed to answer, "Yes." I exhaled slowly. I am proud, and I will continue to be. I rose, brushing the soil gently from my hands. I survived and I thrived. Not for revenge. Not for recognition. Not even for them. I took one last look at the grave. This is for me. Every choice, every step, every lesson. Nathan's words came to mind, but this time I didn't need anyone by my side. I am enough. I am steady. I am my own. I turned away, feeling the earth beneath my feet, the air around me, the life I reclaimed. The sun broke through the clouds. I smiled faintly. I don't need to look back anymore. My heart was calm, my mind clear. Every betrayal, every loss, every shadow had led me here. I whispered, almost to myself, rebirth wasn't about revenge. It was about never abandoning myself again. And with that, I walked forward unshaken, free, and whole.